Hey there folks, I'm Bryce Holdaway, he is Ben Kingsley, and today we want to talk to you about what do marathon runners and weightlifters, Ben, have to do with property investing.
I have no idea, Bryce. You're going to have to tell me.
Well, me neither, I was hoping you did. Hey, it's largely that they're playing a different game. So if you think about the fact that if you were to go into the gym and watch a weightlifter train, there'd be a hell of a lot of those really big weights at the end of a really long bar, and they'd be doing lots of crunches, and their physique would look enormously different to the marathon runner.
That's right.
Got to have an aerobic capacity, got to try and get as much distance as they can. So for us, the link is this, right? If you're a property investor, what you need could be different to what I need, could be different to what you need. And the point of that is important. If we ask you to make a comparison around the training regimes of those two people, and we say, why would you criticize a weightlifter if you're a marathon runner? You go, Ben, you're playing different games. But with money, people don't see it that simply, do they?
No, it's horses for courses, Bryce. So coming back to the broad underlying story that we've got there, what we're really talking about is basically, from someone who wants to get healthy, yes, pumping iron, getting that heart rate up, that metabolism, burning that fat and getting that muscle strength, that's great. Marathon runners, same sort of thing, but their tone and their endurance is completely different. So when we also relate that to how we invest in property, no two scenarios are the same. And so in terms of some of the fundamentals are there, so potentially trying to attract $2,000 a week as a means by which you're going to achieve a passive income is a baseline. So that's sort of like the exercise baseline we're talking with weightlifters and marathon runners. But in terms of how we get there and the pathway in which we go is going to be a unique one for you. And that should never be lost, because a lot of the commentary and education around property investing is do these 5 things well and you're okay. But the question is, well, my situation's not the same as those people. So ultimately what we're talking about here is tailored solutions. Those baseline ideas will only get you so far. It's then about putting the icing on the cake and finishing that story off.
So folks, put in the comments here where you listen to us from, whether you think that people who are investing should criticise the plans of what other people have, and also ask your questions, because shortly I've got the iPad here. We'll go through any questions that you have around this particular topic. But I think what's really important to understand is if in maths 2 + 2 = 4,
yeah.
But when it comes to money, it's not the same outcome, because what you're trying to do is you're actually trying to say, I want to get to that finish line. And for us, we've talked about $2,000 a week as the finishing line where people can buy back their time. But there's different ways to get there based on the fact that the way that we see the world, and we're pretty closely aligned in views and values and where we want to go, but there's a whole bunch of nuances that you and your family want that are totally different to what me and my family want, which makes it really important that we don't go, me criticising your plan about where you want to go to get to that finish line is the equivalent of you being the weightlifter and me being the marathon runner. And in that arena, we think that's stupid. But in money, people just sort of, they make judgments and they form views around what people are doing. And the fact that we have different risk profiles and we all have different salaries and we have career incentives that are different, and what our parents told us when we were a kid about debt, and where I grew up in a lower socioeconomic versus a middle class versus an upper class, whatever those filters and beliefs you have, they are different for different people. So if we can come to the same conclusion that we all want to get to the exact thing that sort of equalises all of us, is whether you're a billionaire, Ben, whether you're on your last cent, the one thing that is equal across those two platforms and everywhere in between is time. We all have the same amount of time. So if we can agree that the end goal is to get our time back, which is the universal unit of currency for us, the way we get there has to be different for different people.
Look, Brian, there's a couple of ways in which we can take this conversation. I'm thinking of a couple of ideas here. One is the criticism, that's true. And so we also hear people criticise, buying capital growth properties, negative gearing. No, that's not the way to do it. You've got to get cash flow positive properties. There's all these different pathways. And so you hear a lot of arguments and debates around those pathways. But the reality should be around what's in it for you. And as you were talking there, another sort of idea just jumped into my head. In terms of we're all trying to get our time back and get to that final destination. The other one about keeping up with the Joneses, and I want to be like the people that I'm hanging around with, but guess what? My income's 30% below what their income is, and the reality is cash flow and you've got to invest to make money. So my pathway might have to be different than yours, and I have no choice about that. And someone who's sat in front of hundreds and hundreds of clients over the journey and tried to get them to unpack their value set and what it means to them, and trying to get the alignment in terms of, okay, they see the world this way. And I'm saying, I don't care really what you see out there. I'm really interested in how you see your journey, and how you can get on that pathway. And then once you get that alignment, because that's hard work, right? There's a lot of slow thinking that needs to happen in that. But once you get that in place, then the other parts is just about the sequencing, the money that we have got to work with. And that is why every plan is unique in terms of how you design, the plan that you the plan that you plan to become what you plan to become.
So folks, the highest form of wealth, and hopefully our team can make sure that you can see this, but the highest form of wealth is where you wake up every morning saying, I can do whatever I want today. So in summary, you can do what you want, when you want.
Let me see if we can move that up. Maybe even sort of bring it up in size. Let's see if we can. Oh, Bryce, you're brilliant.
With who you want, for as long as you want. So think about that. Do what you want. Okay, so you roll over instead of rolling out. When you want to do it, with who you want, hanging out with the people that bring you the most joy and the most connection, for as long as you want. And that's the highest dividend that money pays. So that's what we really want to talk about today. If that's the goal, we want to get there. The universal currency is time. And we want to get to the point where saying, criticizing your plan or my plan or her plan or whoever's plan, it's just a work of fiction. There's no point, because when you get to retirement, your $50 looks exactly the same as my $50, and generally speaking, if we're in the same market, your $50 can't buy more than my $50. So if it's universal that we all want the same currency at the time, Ben, it'll just be a tap, won't it? We won't see those.
No, we probably won't see the dollars. We'll just see digital.
yeah, exactly. Just tap our phone. But okay, so our universal things is time is currency.
Yeah.
And the fact that we all have the same purchasing power with the money at the end. It's just the journey in between. So give us a like if you like what we're talking about here today, and the fact that criticising other people's plans is different. So this is the point we want to. So if we'll see if we can try and get this into shot too, Ben.
Looking good.
So really, in our observations, what you can do to get happiness, and let's be honest, everyone listening to this has got a different definition of happiness.
Yep.
So we can't sort of go, well, here's a box. But generally speaking, it's complicated, happiness. But it comes down to a few core things. A loving family, you have your health. Health is real wealth. Some friendship that you get to spend time doing life with people you love. This is my new one, Ben. I want to make sure I get 8 hours of sleep every night.
Yep.
I've got children, so I want well-balanced children. You may not have children, may not be a desire, but for us, it's having well-balanced children and being part of something bigger than yourself. And when you think about that, we put this little note down here that not a lot of money is required to get that, but what is required is time. So again, our universal currency here that we all have is time. Criticising someone else's plan versus our plan is just fraught with just uselessness about it.
No judgment. Don't need it.
If we can acknowledge that everyone's playing a different game, but we're all trying to get to the same finish line, that's the important part. So I guess what we want to talk about today is Ben, it'd be kind of worth you talking about the fact you're the property investment advisor 2 years in a row.
Yep.
And when you see a client, the nuances and the differences that you get to do to say, okay, here's where you are and here's where you want to be, can't be overlaid to another client because of a whole bunch of reasons. What are some of those reasons?
Well, there are so many moving parts when you're sitting down and trying to plan to become what you plan to become. So you're unpacking a story of life. You sort of have aspiration around family, around free time, around holidays, around experiences, all the things that are about living your best life. Now, what you're doing by potentially, learning about this sort of stuff is it's triggering different ideas in your mind. And obviously, as someone who's sat in front of hundreds of clients, I can draw on all of the knowledge of the breakthroughs that I've had with other clients. So, have you ever thought about this? Or this client sort of approached it that way. And so you're bringing all that together. And That's a good sort of reference to the book that we wrote in terms of the Armchair Guide to Property Investing and the case studies that we have in those books. So what we did is we sort of said, well, here is the sort of typical avatars, the starting points of, a couple of adults, no children, adults with children, young kids, and then we've also got single 30-something, and then we've also got, other sort of these types of baseline scenarios. And we unpack the story in terms of how they get there. But it really is a challenge, right? Because if you can't be what you can't see, so we try and make the invisible visible, and we do that through very detailed sequencing of cash flow. So we're making lots of assumptions. So there are around 45 different sort of assumptions built into our simulations. And we're playing with, the surplus cash that we're being able to generate and then putting that money to work. And then ultimately the best way we put that money to work, and this is a property investment. So we think that's one of the best ways to do that. If you want to ask a barber whether you need a haircut, we're saying that exactly. We then sequence that so we can obviously gear that money higher to control a higher asset, which gives us a stronger return on that overall dollar value. And I think that's some of the sort of moving parts that are going on when you're having conversations around your life.
Yeah, it's like the 4 levers. It's like when you've got a bulldozer, you've got levers to move the bucket forward, back, a bit to the right, a bit to the left. It's the same with planning your life. So we've got some questions that are coming through. We're going to answer those. Before we get there, just want to let you know that we're really excited on the back of what Ben just said, is to give you some insights into how we would go about helping a client build a plan that actually gets them their time back, finds that finite finish line, and the specific roadmap that is required to get that person to the end game that they're looking for. So we created a course. I'll see if I can do this, Ben.
Yeah.
If you go to propertycouch.com.au/case study, and just for the avoidance of doubt, Ben, that is a D, /case study, you can see the course that we've just recently put together, launched for the first time, and we want you to get your hands on it because we launch it once a year at a heavily reduced price so that we can get an intake of students that we can focus on for the remainder of the year. So we're in that launch window now and it closes very soon. If you go to that website, you'll see, all the details of the course that you'll get. But really what it'll be is it'll allow you to see, in the book we wrote 6 case studies. In the course we've done 7 case studies because we reckon there was one that we missed when we wrote the book originally. So there's a couple of things you can see. Scenarios on when we originally wrote the book, and then we brought them up to date to current time, 2023, and show you what all the differences are. So you can see what it was then, you can see what the updates are now, and then you have that 7th person. So what it means is you can actually go, I'll pick the one in the course that most relates to me so that I can get all the takeaways, but then we encourage you to look at all the other ones. So you can go, that's a little nuance that's important for me. That's a little nuance that's important for me as well, so that you can actually get to a stage where you can go, hey, listen, I am the marathon runner. You are the powerlifter who lives next door in the next cubicle to me, or down the road, or at the gym, or wherever you're interacting with your friends, and go, this is the pathway that I need to take so that I can get where I need to go. And you're taking a different pathway, but here's the deal. I'll see you at the end, because the finish line's exactly the same. We will have exactly the same amount of time left each, and ultimately, as we wrote in the book, we're trying to get you $2,000 a week, if that's the goal, Ben. Different ways to end up the same destination.
Hey, whilst you're having a look at some of these questions, what I will do is I'm going to double click on your point around 7 case study examples. Well, I know my avatar, I know my household composition is 2 adults and 2 kids, so why do I need to watch the other ones? Well, I can tell you, what Bryce just said a moment ago, it does trigger these ideas, these little sparks of comprehension around, actually, that might be plausible for us. Or actually, I never thought about that. Oh, wow. Oh, I see how those models and those cash flow projections are being impacted by those high school fees or, private or public school fees. Oh, I can see how the new legislation around the tax rates, how that's now impacted it, whatever's legislated, and that's the past and the present. So we've got another range of tax rates that are coming through in terms of reducing the tax rate down to 30 cents in the dollar for higher net income earners. So that is modelled in. So the reason between that was then, this is now, is we've got all of those little nuances that have been changed and updated. So we'll always only have the simulator with legislator changes, so nothing in terms of what's going to happen in the future because we don't know what's going to happen there. But those were legislated as part of the federal government's introduction of reducing the tax rate. So we obviously didn't have that, what do they call it, that bracket creep that was creeping in terms of the tax take from PAYG tax people. So I think that's important to understand. And so I would be encouraging you, the value that you're getting out of this study program is really around watching all of them and seeing all the nuances. Now you'll hear me repeating a few things that I've said in it, but it's like I also want to drill that in. Repetition is a good part of learning as well when you actually start to see those particular case studies get unpacked.
And when you go and have a look at that page, you'll see what the value is because the price is heavily reduced. And the thing is, if you think about the hourly rate that Ben would charge out to actually do this, there's over 12 hours of footage where you've gone through and you've worked through it. And so at an hourly rate, that's enormous, but you get the benefit of doing
Well, it'd be
that.
over $3,000 of my time, as an example.
Easily over that time. And what you'll see too is, to Ben's point too, is some of the fun that we get in our business is we're producing roadmaps, individual roadmaps at the 50 to 100 level every couple of months.
Yeah.
And so the team get together and they say, what about this? And they see this little nuance and they see what about this. So you need to have 1,000 lifetimes to actually get the same exposure that we get within our business to see the different nuances and the different games that people are playing. Some people might be a marathon runner and some people might look like a marathon runner, but they're only running half a marathon. Look similar, but still got different games that they're playing as well. So we get to see all those different games. So I want to encourage you to go and check that out so you can see those games. All right, let's see if we can get some questions here, Ben.
Sure.
It's from Doug. Doug's been a big supporter on us of ours on Facebook. Real basic question to ease you guys into it. We'll be the judge of that, Ben, if that's the case. When describing property performance, it feels like everyone uses percentage growth as the primary measure. Why is this? I understand percentage is a normalised way of comparing how hard your dollar is working, but as the saying goes, we bank in dollars, not percentages. Doug, student of the couch, that is good. For example, a high value property with a lower percentage growth may still outperform in terms of dollars lower valued properties with higher percentage returns. Basic, but appreciate if you could hit the nail on the head for me. Well, in some of the way that Doug's crafted the question is giving some of the insights into the answer to the question already, but that's your saying, Ben. You bank dollars.
Bank dollars, you don't bank percentages. But of course, there's two reasons why. The first one is easily comprehended. Like in terms of when I'm thinking about any type of analysis, I want to try and get an annualized read on that particular thing. So that's one of the reasons why. Because if you see percentage gains of say 4,000 or 5,000%, it's hard to sort of compute that sort of level of growth. But if you think about property over the last say 48 or 50 years, we have got some property values or suburb values that have grown by over 4,000% over that time. So very hard to sort of comprehend. So you sort of bring that back into annualized terms. But the other important part of that and why I share my view strongly around you bank dollars versus banking percentages is because, if you've got a $100,000 property and it's grown by $20,000, then it's a 20% return, and that's looking great as a percentage. But I've only made $20,000. If I've got $1 million property that's grown at 20%, I've basically got $200,000.
Well, even if it grew at 5%,
it's 5%. I still, net the difference. So I think the important part about that is that we do know that properties run in cycles. We do know that it's not a beautiful lineal line of that percentage. But it is important to know that when you're an investor, and I've got to stress this, and this comes back to our course teaching, is what's your position? What type of way do you want to play the game? What avenues can we take advantage of in playing that game? So what's a good example, sport analogy? If I was 5'2" and I wanted to be a world-class rower, my structure, my physical structure would not allow me to be a world-class rower compared to someone who's 6'7", who has got a broader reach and who can bring the oars. It's just not going to happen. You'd have to be an extraordinary person to even remotely get close into the top 200. So what you've got to do is you've got to look at, okay, when you assess a household's financial position, you're going, what can we work with here? What are the plans, but what can we work with here? And there's always going to be trade-offs and judgment calls as made of that. And I think the highlighting point that I say to Doug, and thanks for the question because I love it, is that, you know, when we start unpacking time poor professionals who are on really good incomes, and we say, look, a lot of people out there at the moment are promoting buying $300,000, $400,000 properties. And we go, now, where those properties are located may be a lower socio-demographic area, and you might have a little bit more challenges with tenancy. Do you want to have to deal with that? No, sorry. So when it's all about their context and their game that they want to play in terms of their time poor, they make more money over here, they want these to be passive investments, then we judge that and say, all right, well, what's the better result for you is to get into those better locations. It does mean a bit of your cash is going to be contributed towards that, but ultimately you don't need as many. You know, you don't have to go off and buy 6 or 7 of these smaller ones and have more risk of, you know, more difficult tenants, more ovens, more, hot water systems that you need to replace. All of those things don't play out in terms of the scale that you get. But again, that's not to say that those people who present their cards to play the game would have lower income and need more cash flow, that's not an option for them. So don't dismiss that as a means by that. I mean, in the early part of our pod, we were very much talking to middle to upper class people around, look, if capital growth is the game, that's the reason why you invest, then the reality is that the land values come from the centre and move out wide. Unless that's going to change, and no one can prove to me that that's going to change anytime soon, because if we are talking about, well, they're really nice apples there and the ones out here are oranges, but I like eating apples, well, those apples continually are going to need to keep moving in price, because if I substituted for oranges but I can buy apples at a cheaper, I'm going to go back in and buy those apples. So that's the reality that we're dealing with here. And so there's going to be a lot of debate, and of course, everyone's got an agenda. We might be very good at doing perms and other types of haircuts, but these other people are promoting cheaper haircuts or whatever that looks like in terms of that story. So I know I went off on a bit of a tangent.
I wasn't anticipating a perm coming in just, mate, from the 80s. I grew up with a hairdressing system.
Well, I don't know too many hairstyles, so I just had to come up with what's a
sit across the dinner table. My sister would be at the end of the table. She'd be doing a perm. I'd smell that perm solution, so it's got PTSD around perms. But I wasn't anticipating that. So, folks, all I'd say is take on board exactly what you just heard there, Doug. I would just say for people who have been investing now, we're in our 3rd decade of investing in property. When you started out, it was a game about how many have you got. Now it's a game of how much value do you have, because someone who has multiple properties and sum the value may be less than someone who has few properties and sum the value, because they might be in better locations, they have higher entry points, and then that percentage really does matter. Because as you say, the percentage that growth you get on these smaller properties compared to the percentage growth you get on the better located properties might have a material impact on what you're trying to do. So here's what I always default to. The ATO, you have to lodge your tax return with the Australian Taxation Office in order for you to be able to take advantage of any of the tax benefits that are available to you. So they're probably the best source of understanding how many property investors we have in this country, and we study those numbers intently. And we've been doing it for over a decade. So we see each year that the ATO releases those numbers, and what becomes really apparent is the amount of people that have one investment property is around 73%. Now that fluctuates to 73.9 and 73.2, but in all the years that we've been tracking those stats, it's never come off 73%. So think about that. 3 out of every 4 people stop at 1, and then if we throw into the mix the people who buy 1 or 2, it's 9 out of every 10 have 1 or 2. So most people don't go past 2. In fact, most people don't go past 1. So therefore your point is super important, Doug, that you bank dollars, not percentages. And therefore when you're playing the game and you go and see the case studies that we've gone through, you'll actually see that some people have different price points that they need to purchase in order for them to get where they need to go, but it's very specific for them. So don't get seduced by percentages. I think you're right, Doug. It was a very important question to ask. But we just want to emphasise, hopefully we've caught you in your lunch break to listen to some of this information. The theme today is we're all playing different games, each and every one of us. He and I are pretty closely aligned in our life goals and values, and even then we're playing 2 totally different games in a lot of areas in our life. So me just grabbing his plan and overlaying it on my family is just stupid, and him doing vice versa to his family is just irrelevant. So therefore, if we are playing different games, let's make sure we get one tailored to us. So I just want to encourage you to go to thepropertycouch.com.au/case study. Go and check it out. See if it's for you. The value proposition is enormous just to get some of this man's time for the amount of time that he gives within that course. So I don't think you'll disappoint. So go and check it out. And of course, Ben, today is Thursday. Podcast release day.
3 o'clock.
We've got some case studies that we're talking about today in our podcast. So 3 o'clock, Ben. Now, if I live in Perth, is that 3 o'clock Perth time? No, it's 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So go and check that out. Go and check this out to thepropertycouch.com.au/case study. And the way that you check out our podcast is to go to thepropertycouch.com.au.